the amount of time that it takes you to learn a riff is a direct result on how well you understand every piece that goes into making the riff what it is, then how confident you are at playing the specific techniques that are required in order to play this riff correctly. And then finally connecting these two ideas together. So that's what we're going to get into today with one of the more substantial riffs off of my personal favorite Metallica album, Ride the Lightning. It is the main riff off of the first track on the album, Fight Fire with Fire. This particular album is very meaningful to me because it was the first of their studio albums that I ever purchased. I had a burnt copy of the original S&M, and then I had some songs that I had downloaded on, I think, LimeWire or whatever downloading program that we were using at that time back in like maybe 04. So I didn't know anything about like the eras of albums, like what was from the 90s, 80s, whatever. I just knew that there's a few songs that I definitely liked. So I'd made $20 washing cars for my dad, and I rode my bike to the local CD shop, which was like 3 miles away, and I just searched through the Metallica albums, and I looked on the back, and I'm like, okay, I know that song, and then I saw Fade to Black, and I'm like, that is my favorite song right now. So I ended up buying that album, and I loved every single song on the album from start to finish. I literally listened to it nonstop until I bought Master of Puppets. That's my introduction to Ride the Lightning album, and I love it still to this day. So before we get into this riff breakdown, I just wanted to thank all of you that are watching the videos, liking the videos, commenting, and DMing, and just support in general. It's amazing. When I started this about a year ago, I didn't know what it was going to be, if I'd even like doing it. I know that I like playing guitar, but I didn't know if I was going to like creating videos and trying to explain like my successes and whatnot, and try to figure out ways to teach specific ideas. But to be honest with you, the positive engagement is what makes it good. I love talking to you guys one-on-one through DMs. So if you guys have me on Instagram, feel free to shoot me a DM. So we're going to break this riff down today together by dissecting it and understanding what makes this riff great, and then practicing and learning each specific section and idea before we put it all together, play the entire riff, and then eventually play it up to speed, which is, in my opinion, that is the hardest part, and my right arm is extremely tired and it feels like it's about to fall off after playing this for about 45 minutes straight. So the first idea that we're going to look at is the power chords that are in this riff. But before we do that, this tuning is going to be an E standard like most Metallica riffs. They do have a few that are in different tunings, but Metallica is mainly going to be E standard, which is E, A, D, G, B, and then E for that small one. The power chords that we're going to be using are the F, F sharp, and G. Home base is going to be this G power chord, but we're also going to use the F sharp and the F as well. First idea to understand is that you're going to want to downpick every single power chord, which potentially could change up the way that you would pick it normally, because you're going to have to go from the power chord to that open rhythm, downstroke, and then downstroke on that first open note for the open rhythm. So just keep in mind that you do want to downpick all of the power chords. So first thing, just learn the power chord rhythm for what it is with nothing in between. So we go G, F sharp, G, F sharp, F sharp, G, F sharp, G, F sharp, and then F. And then another thing that you're going to want to practice and get good at is releasing the power chords quick enough to where you can get back to that open note rhythm, because it is a fairly quick tempo at 194 beats per minute, and these open notes are 16th notes, so you're going to have to play that power chord and release very quickly in order to get back to that rhythm and not make any mistakes or any extra noises in the process. So practicing something like something to just familiarize yourself with playing those power chords and then releasing fairly quickly. But other than that, it's a pretty easy little chord progression. Alright, so now let's talk about palm muting. All the open note rhythms are going to be palm muted, and then the power chords are going to be not palm muted, so that means you have to quickly move your hand from muting to not muting. So instead of taking my hand all the way off and using all that energy to move my hand on and off, I just simply tilt my hand up, and it's still actually touching like this section on my guitar right here by the pickup and the bridge. My hand's still kind of touching it, or maybe it's just like a quarter of an inch off, but I basically just... And that also helps with the picking through those two strings, going from that just single open E string to picking the two. So practice that with just 8 notes instead of 6. 16th notes, just go 3 8 notes down pick. And just stick to that G power chord for now until you get that technique down. And then add in the rest of the power chords once you got it figured out. And if you get through this video and you realize there's no way that I'm going to play 16th notes in between that, I'm just not that good or up to that level, then this is a good starting point for you to where you can still kind of play this riff. It's not the exact way that they play it, but this is a good, like, simplified way to play this riff until you feel comfortable playing those 16th notes. Now let's talk about the open note rhythm section. So this section you definitely want to understand at a slow tempo before you try to play it at full speed, because if you don't, it's so fast that it sounds different when it's played at full speed, and it gets confusing. Your right hand gets confused, not to mention that your right hand gets very tired as well. So learning this without the power chords, I think, is essential. So I'd learn this at probably 50% speed. First of all, let's explain what it is. A group of 6, and then another group of 6, another group of 6, and then 2 and 2. Pauses are where the power chords go. So the 6 open notes at that speed I don't think is very common. So it's important that you learn how to do that. You teach yourself how to do that to where it's second nature. You're going to have to be able to play it pretty much perfect in order to play this riff up to speed. What I would first practice is just the 6 open 16th notes at a probably like 50% speed. And then just get that down with maybe an extra long rest, and then change it up to where you're just resting for the amount of time that you'd be playing that power chord. And then incorporate the sections with just the 2 open notes as well. So get that entire rhythm down, starting at 50% tempo, and then increase it. And I would get that to where you can play it at maybe 160 beats per minute, or like 70% of full speed, before you start adding those power chords in. Or something else that I mentioned before is that you want to always start that rhythm on a downstroke. So when you add those power chords in, the last note on that rhythm is going to be an upstroke, and then a downstroke on the power chord, and then you're going to have to start with another downstroke. So you're basically going downstroke, power chord, straight back to another downstroke on that rhythm. So now that you guys got all those sections figured out, just make sure that you really practice those and you get those to where it's second nature. You don't have to think about them, because in order to play this riff up to speed, you're going to need to understand these 100% and be able to play them very well. This riff is pretty tricky to play. Let's put this entire riff together, but we'll just play it at like 50 to 70% tempo. So now it's time to increase the tempo until you get it up to 194 beats per minute, which is what the song is played at. It can be pretty difficult. It is very tiring on the right hand, especially if you are continuing to try to practice it at that speed. However, this riff is amazing for building stamina, but if your right arm is not strong enough to play this riff fast right now, then don't get discouraged. Just keep practicing and practicing at a slower tempo. And then just increase the tempo like 5 BPM until you get it up to full speed. And eventually, if you practice it long enough, you'll be able to get it. So it is a little bit difficult to play it to a metronome just because the power chords don't land on the beats. So if you're not familiar with metronome or you haven't practiced with a metronome very much, it might be hard to, you kind of almost have to feel it. You can increase the tempo to like double. So if you're playing, say you're practicing it at 150 beats per minute, increase it to 300 beats per minute, and then play it at an 8/4, and then that'll make it to where there's 8 beats hitting in each measure, so you can figure out which beat those power chords actually land on. They're not going to land in the middle of a beat like they do if you're playing in a 4/4 at like 150 beats per minute or whatever. It's definitely a good exercise to be able to play this to a metronome, so I recommend that if you can do it. But if it's just too hard for you and discouraging and you don't want to try to figure it out right now, playing it to either the song, a backing track, which I don't have for you unfortunately, or the Pro Tab might be a better option for you until you get the riff figured out.